The sea is quiet tonight, though no one feels at ease. Out on the dark waters of the English Channel, thousands of ships float in slow, patient silence. A steel armada spread across the waves. The men aboard them speak in low voices, if at all. Boots shuffle, ropes creak, engines hum beneath the deck. The night carries the smell of oil and salt and the faint metallic taste of fear. It is June 5th, 1944. Somewhere off the southern coast of England, under a cloud-streaked moon, the largest invasion fleet in human history waits for dawn. It is not yet D-Day, not yet the beginning of what the world will later call the turning of the tide. Tonight is the last night before it begins, the last few hours of a world still on the edge of change. Aboard one of the landing craft, a young soldier named Thomas sits on the floor, helmet on his knees. The ship rocks gently with the swells. Around him, men whisper or stare at nothing. A few read crumpled letters from home, words written weeks ago from wives, mothers, children. The ink has blurred in the damp sea air. Each word feels like a relic from another life, another planet. The air smells faintly of diesel and wet canvas. The decks above are crowded with supplies, jeeps, crates, jerry cans, coils of rope, and stretchers stacked neatly against the bulkhead. The ship's lights are covered to prevent any glow from leaking out. Everything is shrouded in shadow. Beyond the thin steel walls, the sea murmurs endlessly. Somewhere on deck, a radio operator adjusts his set. The faint voice of a BBC announcer comes through, muffled, reporting nothing of what's to come. The invasion is still a secret, so secret that even most of the men waiting here don't know exactly where they'll land. They've been told a name, Normandy, but that means little to them. They know only that by this time tomorrow, they'll be stepping onto a beach under fire. Outside, the fleet stretches from horizon to horizon. Over 5,000 vessels, transports, destroyers, landing craft, gunships, all gathered for one purpose. Their outlines drift in and out of the mist, ghostly and immense. From the sky, if anyone could see through the clouds, the channel would look like a sheet of steel glinting in moonlight, dotted with shadows of ships. In the officers' quarters, maps lie open under dim red lamps. Pencils mark beaches labeled with code names: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, Sword. The words themselves sound harmless, almost comforting, like seaside resorts. But every man here knows that behind each name lies a stretch of coast defended by mines, barbed wire, and concrete bunkers. The storm that delayed the invasion for 24 hours has passed. The wind has dropped. The tide will be right at dawn. It will go ahead. On deck, a sergeant walks among his men, checking straps and helmets. His voice is low but firm, his boots thudding softly on the boards. The men nod, silent. Some smile weakly, as if to show they've heard. One soldier fumbles with a rosary tucked beneath his collar. Time passes slowly. Midnight comes and goes. The hum of engines grows louder as the fleet begins to move into formation. On the horizon, the faint glow of tracer fire flickers where the Royal Air Force and the Luftwaffe duel in the upper dark. Far above, unseen bombers are already crossing the coast, dropping flares and explosives on German batteries inland. The men aboard the ships can feel the dull tremor of those distant blasts through the soles of their boots. A corporal opens a tin of condensed milk and shares it with the man beside him. The sweetness cuts through the salt air. The chaplain moves quietly among the ranks, offering blessings or just sitting beside those who want someone near. Around 2 a.m., a sudden sound splits the quiet. The deep rolling boom of naval guns testing their ranges. One by one, across the horizon, great flashes light the sky. The fleet is awake now. Men rush to the railings to watch. The thunder echoes over the sea, bouncing between the ships like the beating of some vast, distant drum. Thomas closes his eyes and leans back against the cold metal wall. He tries to imagine the beach, the shape of it, the smell of it. He pictures sand, cliffs, maybe a few cottages in the distance. He doesn't know the name of the place he's heading for. He only knows that somewhere out there, across that dark water, thousands of other men are waiting for him. Men with rifles and machine guns, men ordered to stop him from ever setting foot on their soil. The sea grows rougher. The landing craft tilts and creaks. A few men retch quietly into buckets, embarrassed by their own weakness. The medics hand out seasickness tablets and water bottles, reminding them to drink slowly. It's cold enough that the breath from each man's mouth lingers like smoke. The officers receive their final orders. In the glow of a single lamp, they unfold the briefing sheets marked Top Secret, Operation Overlord. Coordinates, timings, objectives. Each man studies them in silence. They sign their initials, fold them away, and say nothing more. The fleet is fully underway. Engines rumble beneath the decks. The channel churns white beneath the hulls. Men can feel the vibration in their ribs. Every so often a gust of wind brings the faint scent of fuel and cordite from the ships ahead. Overhead, the drone of planes is constant now. C-47 transports carrying paratroopers across the coast. Somewhere far away, those men are already descending into darkness under silk canopies, landing behind enemy lines to seize bridges and roads. In the mess area, an officer pours himself a cup of coffee that tastes mostly of metal. He looks at his watch. Nearly 4. Dawn is coming. Around him, the men are quiet again. The earlier chatter faded. They are thinking now. Of families, of promises, of unfinished things. Some close their eyes and try to rest, rocking gently with the ship's motion. Others stare at the dim ceiling, too awake for sleep. Every so often a flash of light rolls across the low clouds, lightning or maybe gunfire from the coast. No one can tell. The horizon seems endless, featureless, a faint gray strip between sea and sky. In the control room, the captain stands at the helm, hands clasped behind his back. His face is calm but pale. Below deck, the men begin to move. Helmets are adjusted, straps tightened, rifles checked one last time. Each man's kit feels heavier now. The packs dig into shoulders, the webbing cuts into palms. A few soldiers tape photos of loved ones inside their helmets, small private reminders of home. Thomas takes out a folded postcard from his breast pocket. It's from his sister, written 2 months earlier. Don't forget to write when this is all over. He reads it twice, then carefully tucks it away again. The sea outside grows rougher as they near the French coast. The sound changes, no longer open ocean, but shallower waters breaking against the bow. The engines slow to a deep throbbing rhythm. In the distance, faint flashes mark the beginning of the bombardment. The battleships offshore have begun to fire. Each salvo lights the sky, followed by a slow rolling boom that shakes the air. No one speaks now. The only sounds are the waves slapping the hull and the creak of gear. A few men whisper silent prayers. One hums a tune under his breath, something soft and slow, almost a lullaby. The men rise to their feet. The ship's doors open, letting in the cold pre-dawn wind. The horizon glows faintly pink. Dawn over the channel. The sea glitters, calm but deceptive. Smoke hangs low on the water from the naval bombardment. Boots clatter on metal. Men shuffle down gangways into smaller craft, clinging to ropes and railings. The engines roar louder. The smell of exhaust fills the air. Some wave half-heartedly to the men still aboard the mother ship, unsure if they'll see each other again. As the landing craft detach, the main vessel looms behind them like a dark silhouette, fading into mist. The smaller boats bounce heavily in the swells, heading toward the invisible line of the French coast. For a moment, Thomas looks back over his shoulder. The horizon is full of ships, an endless city of gray steel stretching to the edge of sight. Above it, the first rays of sunrise pierce through the clouds, turning the water to molten silver. The invasion has begun to move, slow and unstoppable. He turns forward again. The wind stings his eyes. In the distance, faint booms echo across the water, the sound of guns growing clearer with every mile. The coast is still hidden, but he can sense it now. The land is waiting. Inside the landing craft, men grip their rifles tighter. The engine noise rises, spray lashes the sides, and so ends the night before. The longest night of their lives gives way to the longest day in history. The first. Light touches the water. The waves roll on. The beaches of Normandy lie just ahead. The engines have found their rhythm now, a deep, steady thrum that vibrates through the boards of the landing craft like a slow heartbeat. Every man aboard can feel it in his feet. The sound is oddly comforting, a kind of mechanical certainty in a world about to come apart. The horizon ahead is no longer empty. A faint gray line separates sea from sky, and beyond it, though still hidden by mist, lies the coast of France. The men don't talk about it. They just stare forward, eyes half closed against the wind and spray, faces slick with salt water. It was just after dawn on June 6th, 1944. D-Day. The first light spills across the channel in long streaks of silver and rose, painting the rolling water in soft colors that feel too gentle for what is coming. Above the waves, gulls cry and circle, following the fleet as if drawn by instinct. To the west, the dark shapes of destroyers and transports stretch to the horizon. More ships than any man here has ever seen. Each one moves with purpose, part of a vast and silent design. A voice shouts over the roar of the engine, telling the soldiers to keep low and to put their helmets on. Spray lashes over the side as the craft dips into a trough, then climbs again. The air is thick with diesel fumes and smoke. Men crouch lower, gripping their rifles, knuckles pale under grime. They can't see much, only the backs of helmets in front of them and the cold gray water below. The sea feels alive, restless, as if it knows something monumental is about to happen. Somewhere far ahead, the battleships have begun their bombardment in earnest. The horizon flashes with orange bursts, followed seconds later by thunder that rolls across the waves like distant weather. Each blast lights the low clouds from below, turning them briefly to gold before fading to ash again. A few men vomit over the sides, then slump back into place, pale and shivering. The motion of the craft is relentless. Up, down, up again. The smell of fuel and seawater mixes with fear. One soldier closes his eyes and begins to hum quietly to himself, a tune from somewhere back home. Others glance at him but say nothing. The sound of humming seems small and human against the great machinery of war moving all around them. Overhead, planes rumble eastward, waves of bombers and fighters flying toward the coast. Their shadows pass over the water like slow-moving clouds. Occasionally, the men look up and see the faint glint of sunlight on the bombers' bellies, then watch them vanish into the mist. The radio crackles with half-heard commands. All units maintain bearing. 2 minutes to release point. The voice fades in and out with static. Thomas sits pressed against the side of the craft, knees drawn up, rifle held tight across his chest. His fingers are numb despite his gloves. Salt spray stings his face. He can taste it on his lips, a mixture of metal, salt, and oil. He glances at the man beside him, Corporal Mills, who is staring into the middle distance, lips moving silently as if counting something. Ahead, a low drone rises in pitch. It's not the sound of their engines. It's coming from the air. Everyone tenses. Then they see it, a formation of planes flying low over the sea, towing gliders toward the shore. The gliders look delicate, almost peaceful, like giant white birds drifting through smoke. The men watch them pass overhead, their cables humming in the air. The boats press on. The sea grows shallower, the waves shorter, choppier. The smell of cordite thickens in the air. For the first time, they can see the faint outline of land ahead, a low gray smudge beneath the clouds. A few church spires rise above it. A signal flare streaks up from somewhere offshore, green, then red, then green again. The pilot of their landing craft shouts to his crew. The engines throttle down slightly. "Almost there! Ready yourselves!" Every man checks his gear one last time. Rifle straps are adjusted, grenades secured, helmets tightened. They've done this routine dozens of times in training, in quiet English fields with fake beach obstacles and shouted commands. But now, as the sea carries them toward real sand and real guns, every action feels heavier, more deliberate, as if the weight of the world hangs from each buckle. A sudden blast rocks the boat. A shell lands somewhere nearby, sending a column of water high into the air. The men duck instinctively as cold spray crashes down on them. Another explosion follows, closer this time. The water boils with shrapnel and foam. The helmsman yells to keep going. They press forward. Around them, other landing craft rise and fall in the waves, each filled with men just like them, faces drawn, eyes wide, hands trembling. The formation holds, lines of boats cutting through the surf like moving scars. The closer they get, the louder the world becomes. The rhythmic thunder of naval guns gives way to a jagged chorus of smaller explosions, machine guns, mortars, the crack of rifle fire from the shore. Smoke hangs over the beaches like fog. The coastline flickers with muzzle flashes, bright and sharp against the pale sand. Thomas lowers himself slightly, the rim of his helmet clanging softly against the man in front of him. His breath comes in short bursts. He can hear his own pulse in his ears, fast and heavy. The boat jolts suddenly, slamming into something underwater. Maybe a sandbar, maybe a hidden obstacle. The men stumble but hold their footing. The pilot reverses briefly, adjusts course, then pushes forward again. The ramp clatters as it shakes in its hinges. Everything tightens, muscles, faces, silence. The world shrinks to the width of the landing craft. The air feels thick, almost too heavy to breathe. Another explosion erupts to their left. A nearby boat vanishes in spray and smoke. For a moment, nothing remains but debris bobbing on the waves, a helmet, a plank, a floating pack. The men see it, but no one speaks. There's nothing to say. They grip their rifles. The ramp is wet beneath their boots. Time feels like it's slowing, stretching, until even the smallest sound, the click of a safety catch, the crash of a wave, seems impossibly loud. The sergeant takes a deep breath. The ramp hasn't dropped yet. The boat still surges forward, waves crashing against its bow. The men are ready to move, forward, out, anywhere that isn't this narrow box of steel. Thomas looks up one last time at the sky. It's pale gray now, the color of unpolished metal. The sun is climbing, though its light is weak through the mist. He wonders, fleetingly, if the men on the other beaches, Utah, Gold, Juneau, Sword, feel the same mixture of dread and disbelief. Somewhere, miles up and down this coast, thousands more are living this same moment, breathing the same air, waiting for the same word. The engine roars. The boat surges again. The pilot shouts over his shoulder to get ready. The sergeant's hand goes up, then down. The ramp slams open with a metallic crash. Cold water rushes in. Light floods the hold, pale, smoky, filled with motion. The first man steps forward, and the sea swallows him up to his chest. Then another and another. Thomas grips his rifle and follows. The water is freezing, the current strong. Bullets snap overhead, slicing into the surf. Sand and foam mix into a haze. The men push forward, one step at a time, shouting to be heard over the roar of engines and gunfire. He keeps his head down and moves toward the shore. The world has become sound and spray and breath. Nothing else exists. Behind him, the engines fade, replaced by the steady crash of waves and the endless crack of guns. The crossing is over. The land waits ahead, gray, smoking, alive with fire. The first sight of the beach is almost unreal. It rises slowly from the mist, a long, pale stretch of sand littered with obstacles that look like black crosses against the surf. The tide is running in hard, washing over the jagged iron frames the men have been briefed about. Czech hedgehogs, they were called. They look harmless from a distance, like pieces of driftwood tossed by the sea. Up close, they are dark, angular traps of steel planted to rip open boats and snare landing craft. The water around the obstacles boils with gunfire. Shells burst against the tide, sending fountains of spray skyward. Smoke drifts low and thick, rolling inland like morning fog. Somewhere behind it, the cliffs are burning, streaked with the flashes of machine guns and mortars. The ramp has dropped, and the men are wading through waist-deep water. Each step feels impossibly slow. The weight of the gear pulls them down, 40, 50, sometimes 60 pounds strapped to their backs. Rifle, helmet, ammunition, shovel, entrenching tool, rations, canteen. The sea grips at their legs, tugging with every step as if it means to drag them under. Thomas stumbles forward, water slapping against his chest. The beach ahead feels distant, like a mirage glimpsed through a curtain of smoke. He can see shapes moving, men, bent low, running or crawling, small against the vast wall of sand and sea. Around him, bullets skip across the surface, each one making a tiny, precise splash. The sound is strangely delicate, like rain on a metal roof, but each drop is death. He breathes in salt and smoke. The air tastes of cordite and fear. His rifle is slick in his hands. He holds it high above the water, praying it stays dry. Every few steps, someone goes under, tripped, hit, or just too heavy to keep moving. The medics can't stop to help. There's nowhere to hide out here. The water grows shallower. He can feel sand under his boots now, soft, uneven, shifting with every step. He's almost there. The sound of gunfire is deafening, 1,000 sharp cracks echoing off the cliffs. Each impact kicks up fountains of sand and grit. The sea behind him churns with landing craft, smoke, and bodies drifting on the tide. Thomas reaches the edge of the beach and drops to his knees, gasping. The sand is cold and wet beneath him. Bullets hiss overhead, kicking up little bursts of dust. He presses himself flat, the world reduced to the pounding of his heart and the feel of the earth against his cheek. To his left, a tank has made it ashore. A Sherman, its tracks grinding in the sand. It moves a few yards, fires once, and then stops, hit somewhere in the turret. Smoke pours from the hatch. The gun falls silent. A corporal crawls past, shouting for men to follow him toward the dunes. He yells. His voice is ragged, his face streaked with grime. The sound is barely audible over the endless roar of the sea and guns. Thomas begins to crawl. The sand clings to his hands, his knees, his face. Every few feet he stops to catch his breath. The world is chaos, yet everything feels oddly slow, like watching a storm from underwater. The obstacles the engineers were meant to clear are scattered all around. Some are tangled with wire, others are tipped with mines. A few have already detonated, leaving craters that steam in the cold morning air. He keeps low and moves between them, his mind numb, his body acting on instinct alone. Above the noise, there is another sound, a strange, rhythmic whistling. He looks up just in time to see a shell arc overhead, disappearing into the cliffs. A second later, the ground shakes. The shock wave ripples through the sand like thunder through the earth. He feels it in his chest. The tide continues to rise. Waves lap at the bodies lying near the water's edge, tugging gently as if trying to pull them home. Helmets drift past, empty and spinning. The sea carries everything away. Rifles, rucksacks, letters sealed in plastic. Thomas presses forward another few yards. The sand turns darker, wet with seawater and smoke. He finds a low ridge and crawls behind it. A few others have taken cover there too, a handful of soldiers, faces pale beneath grime and exhaustion. They lie there for a few moments, catching their breath, trying to gather what's left of their strength. One man shakes uncontrollably, from cold or fear, no one can tell. Another mutters the Lord's Prayer under his breath, lips barely moving. From the ridge, Thomas can see the beach stretching endlessly in both directions, smoke, wreckage, flashes of fire. Men are still landing in waves, each one spilling out of boats that shudder and veer as they hit the shallows. Some boats make it close enough for the men to jump clear. Others are hit before they reach the sand. Behind the front line, medics move through the chaos, crouched low, dragging the wounded toward whatever cover they can find. The shadow of a tank, the side of a crater, the lee of a dune. Their Red Cross armbands are already smeared with mud and blood. Further out to sea, the battleships continue their bombardment. Their guns flash in steady rhythm, lighting the gray horizon like distant lightning. Each explosion inland sends another plume of dust and debris into the sky. The sound never stops, a continuous rolling thunder that blends with the surf until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. They rise together, half running, half stumbling up the slope. The sand is heavy, clinging to their boots, dragging them down. Each step feels like climbing through molasses. The incline seems endless. Bullets hiss through the air, snapping past ears and shoulders. The smell of burning oil and salt water fills their lungs. Halfway up the beach, they find a line of wooden stakes driven into the sand, each one wired with explosives. The engineers are already at work, cutting the fuses, sweating as they kneel in the open. The sergeant waves them to move right, skirting the obstacles. Another explosion shakes the ground nearby, one of the mines going off anyway. Sand rains down on them, mixed with splinters of wood and stone. Thomas feels something sharp graze his arm, but there's no time to check. He keeps moving. His only thought is forward. Not courage, not fear, just the mechanical act of survival. Near the top of the beach, the ground flattens slightly. A few men have gathered behind a burnt-out vehicle, using it as cover. A radio operator kneels there, headset on, shouting into the receiver. His voice is barely audible, the words lost in static and noise. The radio crackles again. No clear reply, just the faint sound of another voice somewhere in the storm. The men crouch together, watching the smoke shift and curl around the beach. The sun is higher now, though it brings no warmth, only clearer light to see the devastation. The tide creeps steadily upward, swallowing the lower stretches of sand. The sea is red in places, reflecting the fire from the cliffs. For the first time since leaving England, Thomas looks back. The channel stretches behind him, still full of ships, still disgorging men and machines. The scale of it is staggering. Hundreds of landing craft, thousands of soldiers, all pressing forward into this narrow strip of sand. The sky hums with planes, the horizon burns. And yet, despite everything, the chaos, the noise, the fear, there is a strange order to it. Each wave follows the last. Each man moves because the man beside him does. Together they push forward inch by inch, foot by foot. The sergeant raises his hand, signaling again. The men nod. None of them speak. The sound of machine guns ahead fades slightly, a pause between bursts. Then, as if on cue, the heavy guns from offshore begin to fire again, shells screaming overhead toward the cliffs. The shock waves roll across the sand. They move, crawling first, then running. Across the last stretch of open beach toward the low dunes and the shattered remnants of a seawall. The air trembles with the passage of shells. Sand explodes around them, and then, suddenly, they are there. Beyond the high tide line, at the foot of the cliffs. They drop behind a tangle of wire and broken stone, breathing hard, eyes stinging from sweat and smoke. Above them, the German fortifications still blaze, but they are closer now. Close enough to see the dark mouths of gun ports cut into the concrete, close enough to hear the shouted commands of the defenders between bursts of fire. The beach is behind them. The land is ahead. The sea continues to pound the shore, carrying more men, more noise, more courage, more fear. The invasion is no longer a plan. It is a living thing now, moving, breathing, unstoppable. Thomas presses his face against the cold earth and closes his eyes for a moment. He feels the ground beneath him tremble with every explosion. The sand smells of oil and smoke. The cries and gunfire blur into one endless rhythmic pulse, like the sea itself. He doesn't know how long he lies there. Seconds, minutes. Time has dissolved completely. When he opens his eyes again, he sees the sergeant motioning forward, pointing toward the cliffs. They're going up. They begin to move in short, deliberate bursts, learning the rhythm of the guns the way sailors learn the pulse of the sea. The machine guns above speak in long, punishing lines, then pause to breathe. In those thin spaces between breaths, the men rise, scramble 3 or 4 yards, and fold back into the sand like shadows. No one shouts anymore unless they must. Orders are given with hands, with eyes, with the tilt of a helmet. The first obstacle is wire, a dark, knotted tangle strung low across the slope, anchored to stakes, hammered deep into the shingle. Someone has marked it on a briefed sketch weeks ago, but ink is not the same as the sound it makes now when a stray round plucks it and sets it humming. Thomas and Mills slide in, behind a ruptured post. The wire trembles inches from their faces. 2 engineers crawl up, each hugging a length of pipe packed with explosive. Their cuffs are rolled and taped, their faces calm in the way of men who have learned to make peace with distances measured in seconds. One works the end into the wire like a needle through coarse cloth. The other feeds the next section. They move slowly, so carefully it looks almost delicate, the unhurried precision of a watchmaker inside a hurricane. A mortar thumps from somewhere above. The round arrives like a sudden heavy cough in the air and blossoms behind them. Sand lifts, hangs, and drifts down. The engineers do not look up. The pipe reaches the far side of the tangle, snaking through with a small, determined curve. A whisper, A nod, a match struck under a steel helmet to shield the flame. For a breath, the world reduces to the tiny, steady hiss of a burning line. The blast is not enormous, not like the ship's, but it is close. It cleaves a mouth in the wire and leaves the air briefly empty, as if the beach itself had exhaled, the sergeant says, voice low but unmistakable. They pour through the gap by handfuls, not in a rush, but with relentless intention. 3 men, then 5 more, then another pair dragging a crate of rifle grenades. The shingle rasp under their boots. Splinters of stake and bits of twisted wire crunch like shell in a breaker. Beyond the wire, the ground steepens toward the first shelf of sand and clay. The men angle for what little cover exists. A shallow fold, a drift of dune grass, the lee of a shattered tetrahedron of steel. Thomas feels the slope in his thighs, the tide in his lungs. He keeps his eyes where his hands go, glove into sand, boot into a notch, elbow tucked tight. Through smoke he has glimpsed a rectangle of darkness in the concrete, the mouth of a gun whose breathing you can hear. The dry rattle at the end of each burst, the brief reset, the inhale. The embrasure sits low and a little off-center, cunningly angled down the beach to rake the open ground. The sea-wet wreckage behind them is its work. The grenadier's hands move by memory, cup on barrel, cartridge seated, finned nose snug. He sights on a fragment of wall to the right of the port, lifts 2 degrees to allow for the wind running inland off the surf, and fires. The report is a sharp, personal crack beside the great thunder. The grenade arcs, slows, and drops out of sight. A moment later, the embrasure inhales fire instead of air, coughs smoke, and goes dim. Not dead, Thomas thinks, moved back, hiding in the concrete's throat. They edge forward. The air under the cliff is colder, dank with old stone. A ladder of narrow steps, notched into the slope by water and feet, offers purchase. 3 men climb, spread, settle. The world out here is measured in bodies' widths. The small rectangle you fill is what you own. Everything outside it belongs to chance. A medic slides past, on his belly, hands flat, kit clicking softly. His Red Cross band looks brown under the smoke. He does not look at the gun ports. He looks at boots, at sleeves, at the sand for signs that someone has pressed themselves into it and not moved again. He stops, turns his head, listens with his cheek nearly on the ground. His work is a tone beneath the battle, the same steady pitch from first light to dusk. Above, another gun begins to speak, higher up the bluff. The tracers stitch diagonals that are all geometry and no mercy. A destroyer offshore notices. The ship's guns swing and answer with a salvo that seems to peel a layer off the cliff. In the instant before the sound arrives, men on the beach feel it pass through them, a physical thing, a ripple in their ribs. Dust rises in a sheet, and for 3 slow heartbeats the tracers vanish. A canister rolls and sighs into a white wall that smells faintly sweet. The men move inside it, closer to the concrete. Someone sets a charge against the base of a wall, a squat package with a fuse. Hands pat it into the seam like a mason repairing mortar. The blast folds the corner inward and leaves a crooked door where there had been a face. They do not rush it. They learn every shape, press ears to it for sound, taste the soot with their tongues as if it were weather. Then they go, 2 in, 1 covering, then the next pair, angled and economical. Inside the bunker it is cooler still, the sea a muffled rumor. Light comes narrow and sideways. The floor is grit over poured stone. Somebody's enamel mug lies on its side under a shelf. An ordinary wish in an extraordinary place. There is a smell of cordite and old tobacco and something metallic like blood, but thinner. the scent of tools. A figure moves in the dark. The first man's rifle speaks once, not loudly in this small room, and then does not speak again for a while. The bunker breathes out the last of its smoke and becomes a volume of silence the men can occupy without bending. Thomas stays at the mouth, watching the beach through the gap. He notices things that do not belong to a story and yet are the story. A scrap of map paper curling in heat, dune grass bending as if bowing to an unseen passerby, the way sand remembers every hand that touches it until the next gust erases the print. They are not alone. Other groups are doing the same work along the strand, unspeaking brothers in parallel lines. Where one team falters, another's success opens an angle that serves them all. Radios stutter to life and become less static, more sense. A forward observer, crouched behind a shattered seawall, reads coordinates that will become shapes on a bombardier's glass. Far offshore, a ship adjusts 2 degrees and writes a new sentence on the slope. The sergeant squints through smoke, traces a path with his finger. Shallow gully, low lip, dead ground for 15 yards, then a rise. They move when the destroyer fires, using the ship's thunder as a blanket. In the trough, the air is still, almost gentle. You can hear small sounds here, the tick of hot metal cooling, the faint trickle of sand running back into the places men have carved from it. They pass a French signpost split in half, its painted arrow pointing nowhere. A lark lifts from the grass and vanishes into the soot-colored sky. At the lip, the world goes loud again. The strong point is a nest half swallowed by earth, timbered and sandbagged. A periscope tilts and slides away. The sergeant does not ask for volunteers. He assigns by eye, by what each man's breath is doing. Pins draw, spoons fly. The grenades go in with gentle, almost respectful, underhand arcs, the way you might return a borrowed thing. The concussion folds inward like a fist opening. The assault team enters on the second breath after the blast. Not the first, which is too bright, but the second, when the room remembers its shape. There is motion, then stillness. Clear, again, another notch in the day's long tally. Outside, the wind shifts and the smoke thins. The sea widens behind them. Ships orderly as houses, white wakes trailing like paths in a garden. New craft touch the shallows and tilt their ramps. Men step down and inherit the beach as if it had always been waiting for them. Engineers drag another Bangalore forward, crawling in an ungainly, heroic way that has no name. A mortar crew nests in the lee of a wrecked tractor and sets its base plate with 3 careful stamps. They align the tube with 2 fingers and an instinct that was practiced yesterday and is survival now. The first round goes long, the second walks back with the easy humility of corrected work. The third finds the rhythm of the cliff. You feel the defender's fire ebb there, as if a muscle had unclenched. The radio finally speaks with confidence. The forward observer lifts a panel of colored cloth, holds it steady in wind, then eases it down. In response, high on the slope, a casemate coughs dust and falls strangely quiet, like a room when a clock stops. Between strong points, in the small human corners where a battle hides its heart, men do ordinary kindness without announcement. A canteen cap is pressed to a split lip. A glove is slipped onto a hand that lost one. A photograph is scooped from the sand and handed to the nearest pocket with no name exchanged. These things stitch the minutes together in a way beyond orders. By late morning, though morning is an idea and not a fact on a day like this, the shape of the fight has changed. The first wave is no longer a line pressed flat against the shore, but a scatter of small fires gnawing inward. Each bunker, silenced, becomes a hinge. Each hinge turns the next door. Runners carry messages where wires cannot yet live. A corporal, hoarse and cheerful, shepherds a trickle of men into a shallow draw that did not exist on any map. "You're a platoon now," he says, and because he says it, that is what they are. Thomas feels the ground under his palms grow more like earth and less like beach. Grass returns in patches. A beetle, glossy and outrageously alive, trundles across the back of his glove and refuses to be hurried. He can smell loam under the cordite. The edge has been crossed, a difference so subtle you only know it by the way your shoulders forget to hunch for a breath or two. They pause beneath the low lip of another earthwork while the sergeant counts the living by eyes and names. He nods once, a small accounting. The track, when they reach it, is nothing. 2 shallow grooves and a memory of wheels. But to men who have been measuring the world in inches, it has the presence of a road. They align along it like words falling into a sentence. Behind them, the beach is a thunderhead held low to the earth. Ahead, the country tilts upward into hedgerow and field. A runner arrives, cottoned with sweat and spray. "Message, sector boundary shifting, left-hand strong point secure, right-hand pillbox suppressed, not cleared. Do not advance past the orchard wall until smoke marks blue." He does not wait for acknowledgement. He is already another man's messenger by the time the sergeant lifts a thumb. They hold, and in holding they notice the quiet's thin edge. It is not peace. It is the arithmetic of intervals, the space between salvos, the breaths between bursts. In that space, Thomas hears a bell. Not a church bell, something smaller, tinny, a goat's bell or a buoy's minor voice gone inland. It rings twice, then refuses to exist again. He knows he will remember it for years, the way you remember a stranger's sentence from a long train ride. When the smoke on the right flares to the agreed color, the second wave, newer men with fresh boots and fresh fear, begins to flow past. The sergeant touches shoulders as they go. It is nothing and everything, the law of days like this. A young lieutenant from the passing unit kneels by the sergeant, map trembling on his thigh. When the last of them is gone, the beach seems to exhale again. The thunder does not stop, but it belongs a little less to the men in this fold of ground. They are still the first wave, but the phrase has changed tense. Not an event about to happen, not a cliff they are thrown against, but a thing they have been and are now walking out of. "Water," the sergeant says, and they drink in careful sips. The canteen is warm from a body and tastes faintly of metal and the sea. It is the best water Thomas has ever known. He looks back once more, not for long, and sees something that was not there at dawn. Order. Flags on short staffs marking safe lanes. Engineers stacking the last of the unused charges in tidy rows. A chaplain kneeling with a man who is breathing and will keep breathing. A signalman standing on a crate, panel lifted, arm steady as a mast. The shore, which had been a scream, is learning to speak. Ahead, the cart track leans into the pasture. A hedgerow waits with its patient leafy secrecy. Beyond it lies the inland push, a new grammar of danger and ground. The first wave has done the work of beginning. They rise, lighter by the weight of the beach behind them, and move into the fields. The sea keeps its rhythm at their backs, and the day goes on, longer than any day has a right to be. The cart track breaks against the first true rise of ground, where the beach becomes earth that can hold a root. Here, the wind changes character, less salt, more soil, and the air carries the faint, damp scent of things that live under leaves. The men feel it first in their knees, not the sliding give of shingle now, but the tug of turf that tries to keep your boot. They move by measure. The sergeant parcels the slope into small, ownable distances. Each piece becomes a job, and jobs can be done. Thomas and Mills take the right-hand seam where dune marries clay. The seam has been shaped by rain and the cautious feet of men who have used it before there was a map. It is a place for hands and elbows and the quick, low scramble that leaves your breath in tidy, survivable bundles. Wire returns. New rows set back from the first, lower and smarter, dressed with trip flares and scraps of tin that tattle when touched. No sketch had shown this. The engineers read it like Braille. Knives go to work at wrist height. A bayonet tip lifts a loop the way you lift a hair from a comb. One wrong pull would ring the slope like a bell. The wires come apart, patient finger by patient finger, until a man can slip through without the ground telling on him. The wind carries an irregular tapping from high on the bluff. Sniper, or a curious piece of wood giving voice in heat? The men treat it as if it were both. A mortar team squats 3 terraces down and sets its plate shallow, earbuds to the stem, listening for the ground's willingness to return the round exactly as sent. The tube coughs, the round climbs, silence counts. Far up, something scuffs and then quiets for a while, as if a hand had closed on a throat. They climb again. The sand at this height has a trick to it. It holds you until it doesn't, then slides half a boot length and makes you do the step again. You learn to lean your weight forward and keep your pack centered. The trick is older than war. Thomas learns it in 3 tries and does not call it learning, just relief. Below, the beach has changed color, less metal, more geometry. Markers stand where chaos stood an hour ago, little flags and painted boards. From this height, the sea looks domesticated, doing ordinary sea work, dragging and laying, dragging and laying. It is hard to believe that the same water tried to keep them. At the next shelf, the earthwork is not a bunker, but a trench cut in a conservative mood. Shoulders wide, angle of fire guarded, lined with plank, salvaged from somewhere inland. The trench holds no one now, only the proof that someone has been careful. Here, a tin of oil with a rag stuffed in the mouth, a stack of magazines wrapped in wax paper, the ghost of last night's tobacco in the air. The men do not linger. Trenches are funnels for attention. They cross it in 2 moves and leave it to the map. The sergeant marks them on with a knuckle. The draw is a shallow cut in the hill where rain chooses to run when it is in doubt. It offers cover that feels like a gift and can become a trap when a clever gun looks down it. Mills checks it with the slow peak of a man who intends to be old someday. Nothing wakes. They pass it one by one, spacing kept, heads low enough that their helmets brush the thrift. A French fence presents itself. Weathered chestnut rails, splayed where blast and time have argued. It belongs to no one now and everyone, the kind of fence that persists out of habit. They use its shadow for a count of 10. The shadow is thin, but shade has a human logic. Any place a body can imagine being smaller is real enough to matter. The first defensive line proper, what the sappers had listed as forward works, announces itself in smells before shapes. Hot earth, damp sandbag, the sour of old creosote. Then the parapet shows, low and grassy, with the taut look of something renewed often. The sergeant signs for the same dance they used below. Smoke feathered on the windward side, 2 frags for the corner, one charge tucked where the revetment cheats into concrete. The men move as if they have rehearsed together for years. The beach taught them in an hour what rehearsal had only suggested. Smoke lifts, walks along the parapet like a man who refuses to be hurried, then leans. The frags go in with that small, careful arc that marks an experienced throw. The charge kisses the seam and snugs in. Breath holds, sand breathes out. They enter with knees bent and shoulders narrow, muzzles low and then high, in the order drills have trained into muscle. Inside is a puzzle solved by habit, a step down to a firing niche, a traverse cut to break a straight line, a shelf for ammunition, a slit to the rear for air and words. The climb continues in paragraphs set by ground. A scallop of dune, a run of heath, a patch where sand has hardened into pale plates that ring softly under boot, like china. Everywhere are the traces of other hands, rails at a convenient angle for dragging a gun, steps pinched from clay with a trowel, the genius of small improvements stacked over months. War is nothing if not the worship of the practical. Medics thread upward in a separate economy, light-footed and grave, stopping where the ground insists. One kneels by a private from another outfit and speaks in a voice a mother would recognize. The private's breathing is high in the chest, the sound of an instrument a little out of tune. The medic anchors him to the day with ordinary questions, name, town, the color of his front door. The answers come, thin but present. A hand is squeezed, a tag is marked. A route back is chosen by kindness and slope. None of this appears on the map, yet it decides the shape of tomorrow. Communications arrive like language after a fever. A wire team reels line over the shoulder of the hill, clipping to low stakes with small metallic kisses. A signaller raises a collapsible mast, the height of a man, and nests it under the lee of bramble, then blinks a lamp at a destroyer offshore until the destroyer blinks back. A corporal spreads a damp map on a ration crate, and for the first time since dawn, the penciled line that says "limit of advance" looks like a promise and not a joke. Mid-slope, Thomas feels the change that matters more than any objective. The enemy's fire is no longer a single punishing sentence, but a string of shorter clauses interrupted by the need to think. Their machine guns no longer comb the beach. They prod, they test. That means friends are working along the flank, or a ship has found the range, or a mortar team in a dip has learned a math problem that fits this hill. They crest the dune's shoulder and see it, the first proper exit inland, what the planners had called a draw, what a farmer would call the sensible way a cart goes. It is pinched and watched. A concrete box sits like a molar on the right-hand lip, its mouth cut cunningly to rake the path. Beyond it, the road runs up toward hedges that partition the country into green rooms. The road is the key. The road admits wheels, and wheels admit weight, and weight beats walls. The sergeant is not greedy. He does not say, "Take the pillbox." He says, "Pin it hard, mark it for the ships. Find the back door." The observer's radio cracks a little, then clears its throat. "Able, this is Red 2. Mark target 5 with smoke. Request 3 rounds, battery, bracketing." Words that would sound like ritual to anyone else are bread to these men. Smoke goes up, a color agreed in a briefing room 2 countries away, and the wind does its small, honest work. Far out, a gun captain says a practical sentence, and the sea writes in thunder. The first round lands long, behind the box. You feel it more than see it, a nudge in the ribs from a giant friend. The second comes short, spitting sand over the lip so that the embrasur's breath turns white for a moment. The third lands where a human eye had guessed, and a human hand had confirmed. The box coughs dust from seams it did not know it had. Its mouth goes quiet in a way that means men inside are choosing new words. The men on the slope choose theirs too. While the guns speak, a pair of scouts have already flowed to the left, using the draw's low shoulder and the affectionate clutter of gorse. They do not run, they practice continuity. Where the slope kinks, a length of collapsed wire offers a tunnel of shadow, and they borrow it. A rear slit shows, shoulder high and mean. Mills, who has had a steady morning, lays his front sight in the slit's tidy rectangle and does a piece of work that will not be in any citation, but will live in 3 men's bones. A charge follows at a polite interval, placed in a corner where concrete hides its pride. When the scouts report rear compromised, the box ceases to be a noun and becomes ground, which is something men can own. The draw opens, still watched by small, malicious angles, still dangerous if taken at a run by a crowd. The sergeant refuses a crowd. He orders a file, spaces it with the care of a man setting fragile crockery to dry. Engineers mark a lane with pickets and white tape, a domestic gesture on an indecent day. A tank noses up from the beach below, testing the grade like a dog testing ice. Its tracks bite, slip, bite again. Men on either side stay well away from the track's mind, which is single and strong. At the bend, the road flattens into a yard's width of honest gravel. On the left, a farmhouse squats behind a wall grown soft with moss. The shutters are closed. A chicken wire gate hangs ajar, absurd and perfect. A sign reads the name of the lane in chipped enamel. The letters are French and civilized. The men read them with a private, grateful ache, and then put them away for later. They hold the bend long enough to count themselves in a way that feels like respect. Water goes around. A tin of sweets surfaces from someone's deepest pocket and makes a quiet tour. A corporal from another company arrives with 4 men and a grin that has survived the morning. From here, the country announces a new grammar. Hedgerow, ditch, gate, sunken lane with surprises, a farmhouse that could love you or betray you depending on the hour. Thomas leans his helmet to the wall's cool stone and lets his breath settle. In the near distance, the sea is a rumor. In the nearer distance, a bell rings, this time unmistakably a cow bell, offended and alive. The day is enormous, but it comes, finally, in pieces a man can hold. They rise together when the word comes, shouldering the inland. Behind them, the sand remembers their hands for a while and then forgets, as sand is meant to do. Ahead, the fields wait with their old practical problems. The climb is done. The beach is something that happened. The first defensive line is a past tense. They step onto the road that was always going to be taken by someone. Today, it is them. By midday, the tide has turned. The sea that once roared with defiance now lies further out, dragging wreckage and silence back toward the horizon. The sound of gunfire still rolls along the coast, but it comes now in bursts. Not the endless roar of the morning, but the measured punctuation of men consolidating ground. The invasion has found its foothold. From the top of the bluff, the view is unreal, as if someone had taken every ship in the world and placed it gently on the surface of the sea. Lines of landing craft continue to approach in waves, each smaller than the last, carrying more men, more supplies, more of everything that makes an army breathe. Smoke drifts lazily between sky and water, softening the edges of it all, turning war into a moving painting. The men who made it off the beach are scattered across the slope, digging, wiring, clearing. They move with the quiet urgency of people who understand that survival now depends on preparation. There are no speeches, no orders shouted above the noise, only the rhythm of shovels, the click of entrenching tools, the thud of earth falling. The sound is almost meditative. Thomas works beside Mills, turning soil that still smells faintly of the sea. Each scoop reveals more of the strange mixture that this ground has become: sand, grass, shell fragments, and the twisted remnants of wire. They dig until their palms ache and the muscles in their arms burn. Then they keep digging. Just beyond the rise, bodies still lie in the places where they fell, half covered by the shifting sand. Medics move among them quietly, marking, tending, carrying. Every now and then, a single shot echoes inland. the brief, sharp note of mercy or necessity. The sun is high now, weak but bright. The air is heavy with the mingled scents of smoke, oil, and something metallic that clings to everything. The adrenaline of the landing has ebbed, leaving behind an exhausted clarity. The strange calm that comes when fear has nowhere left to go. A group of engineers move past, unwinding great coils of barbed steel, planting posts in the churned earth. They work fast, marking the new defensive line. Every man knows that what has been taken this morning could be taken back by evening if the Germans regroup. The word counterattack is whispered like a spell no one wants to cast aloud. Further down the slope, a handful of men are assembling a radio set on the back of a jeep. The equipment looks impossibly fragile amid all the ruin: a metal box, a wire antenna, a headset. Yet when the operator presses his earpiece tight and begins to speak, it feels as though the whole invasion breathes through that single voice. The reply crackles faintly, a thread of sound across the wind. "Hold position! Hold position!" The phrase settles over them like a mantra. A few yards away, a group of riflemen stand guard beside a shallow trench. Their faces are streaked with sweat and dust. One lights a cigarette, cupping the flame carefully against the breeze. The smoke rises straight up, the first still air of the day. No one answers. There's nothing to say that wouldn't sound like a prayer. From behind the ridge, the sound of engines approaches, the first tanks moving inland. The ground trembles as they climb the slope, treads grinding through the churned sand. The Shermans emerge one by one, their hulls scuffed with salt and soot. Each one carries a faint smell of hot metal and diesel, a familiar, oddly comforting scent. The infantry step aside as they pass, watching the great machines lumber forward toward the hedgerows. Their commanders wave briefly, faces blackened with soot, eyes hidden behind goggles. The tanks move slowly, cautiously, their turrets turning left and right, like beasts sniffing the air. The tanks are followed by supply trucks, crates of ammunition, food, water, bandages. Men begin unloading them in neat stacks, forming a temporary depot among the dunes. Every crate is accounted for, every shell logged. Order begins to assert itself again, tentative but real. At the far end of the slope, a chaplain kneels beside a small cluster of crosses, fashioned hastily from rifle stocks and bayonets. His head is bowed, his hands folded around a book that looks older than he is. The words he speaks are lost to the wind, but the gesture alone is enough, a quiet act of defiance against the chaos that has consumed the morning. For a moment Thomas watches him, feeling something stir in his chest. Not faith exactly, but a strange, heavy gratitude for the persistence of small human things. Beyond the ridge, the sound of battle continues. Other beaches, other men, still fighting for the same fragile strip of coast. The distant rumble of artillery rolls inland like thunder that refuses to end. But here, on this piece of ground, a kind of uneasy stability has taken root. By mid-afternoon, the first field kitchens are set up. The smell of coffee mixes with the smoke of spent gunpowder, a scent so ordinary, so domestic, it almost feels out of place. Men gather in small groups, eating in silence, their faces turned toward the sea. Some stare without seeing, others speak softly, voices stripped of tension. A medic sits nearby, bandaging a man's arm. Thomas looks at them and wonders if he'll ever see home again. And if he does, whether he'll be able to find words that make sense of this place. As the afternoon drifts on, the shape of the battlefield changes once more. Engineers begin to clear paths inland, marking safe routes through the minefields. Bulldozers arrive, snorting and grinding, pushing sand into makeshift roads. Jeeps and trucks follow, filling the air with dust and diesel. The beach that was once chaos now begins to resemble a base, crude, improvised, but alive. They dig deeper, widening the trench, stacking sandbags. Each motion feels slower now, not from fear or confusion, but from fatigue, the kind of weariness that seeps into the bones. Somewhere down the line, a soldier begins to hum, a tune half remembered, low and steady. Others join in, humming under their breath as they work. The sound spreads quietly through the trench like a current of shared exhaustion and calm. As evening approaches, the light begins to soften. The long shadows stretch across the dunes, and the sea glows with a pale, ghostly gold. The tide creeps back in, touching the wreckage of the morning with quiet indifference. The air cools. For the first time all day, the men breathe without smoke in their lungs. A messenger arrives, moving from group to group. Reinforcements landing till midnight. Expect a counterattack at first light. No one flinches. They simply nod, already resigned to the rhythm of it. The war gives, then takes, then gives again. As darkness falls, the glow of ships offshore flickers faintly on the horizon. The fleet looks impossibly distant now, as if it belongs to another world. The men dig in tighter, laying wire, stacking ammunition, preparing for what comes next. Mills sits down beside Thomas, resting his back against a sandbag wall. He takes off his helmet and rubs a hand over his face. They sit in silence for a long time, watching the stars appear one by one over the black water. Somewhere along the line, someone starts a small fire in a metal drum. The orange light flickers softly on faces that look years older than they did that morning. A few men pass around a canteen of tea, bitter, lukewarm, perfect. From the dark beyond the dunes comes the sound of waves and, faintly, the low groan of ships shifting in the current. The world feels enormous again, too big for what they've just done, too vast to understand. The night deepens. Somewhere inland, flares rise briefly, lighting the horizon white, then fade. The first day of the invasion ends not with victory, not with triumph, but with the soft, steady sound of men breathing in the sand they've claimed, and the sea rolling on, eternal and indifferent, washing away the footprints of the living and the dead alike. They have secured the beachhead. But the war, like the tide, is only beginning to come in. By dawn, the air has changed again. The sharp metallic tang of gunfire has thinned into the earthy scent of dew and soil. Mist hangs over the fields beyond the ridge, rolling gently between hedgerows and craters. For the first time since the landing, there is birdsong, faint, uncertain, as if the creatures themselves are not yet convinced the noise of men has truly passed. The order comes at first light. Advance inland. No ceremony, no bugle. Just the quiet voice of a sergeant walking the line. The men rise slowly from the shallow trenches they dug in the night. Their bodies ache, their uniforms stiff with salt and mud. Coffee boils somewhere in a tin mug, the smell bitter and familiar. The push inland is nothing like the beach. There is no open horizon, no sense of scale, only tight, claustrophobic fields hemmed in by earthen banks and tangled hedgerows. The countryside of Normandy is beautiful and cruel in equal measure, green and quiet, but full of places for death to hide. The road leading inland is narrow, rutted, half covered in sand from the previous day's wind. It winds between low stone walls, past scattered farmhouses and orchards, heavy with unpicked fruit. The smell of apples mixes with diesel and gun oil. Thomas walks near the front of the column, his rifle held loosely, eyes scanning the hedges. Every leaf feels suspicious. Every gate could hide a machine gun. The training manuals never mentioned how alive the land itself could feel. watching, waiting, listening. Behind him a jeep rattles forward carrying ammunition and stretchers. Its tires hiss softly in the damp grass. To the left, two tanks crawl along a parallel lane, their engines growling like restless animals. The ground shakes faintly with every turn of their treads. The silence here isn't peace. It's the breathing pause between two storms. Every sound becomes enormous. The click of a safety catch, the flutter of a bird, the snap of a twig beneath a boot. Men flinch at the smallest noises, nerves stretched thin by anticipation. They pass a farmhouse, stone walls, red shutters, half the roof caved in. A French flag hangs limply from a window. In the yard, a chicken pecks at the dirt beside an overturned cart. It feels absurdly normal, like a piece of another life dropped into this one. A boy's bicycle leans against the wall, its frame rusted, the front wheel missing. Thomas slows as they pass, wondering what became of the family who once lived here. Mills glances at him, reads the thought, and says nothing. There's no space for sentiment, not yet. The road forks ahead. The lead tank halts, its gun turret swiveling toward a line of trees. The commander peers through binoculars, scanning the horizon. They wait. The mist shifts, curls, dissolves. Then, nothing. The road remains empty, the trees still. The column moves on, every man aware of how exposed he is in this small, open world. By mid-morning, they reach the first village, a cluster of stone houses and barns, half abandoned, half destroyed. The church steeple still stands, its bell silent, its roof scorched. The streets are eerily tidy, as if someone swept them before leaving. A French farmer emerges from a doorway, hands raised, eyes wide. His face is lined and hollow. He speaks quickly, gesturing toward the fields beyond. He is indicating that Germans are that way. The sergeant nods, claps the man on the shoulder, and signals to his men. The formation spreads out. The tanks roll ahead, flanked by infantry moving low along the walls. The first real test of the inland push has begun. They move through the fields in short bursts, crouch, sprint, pause, listen. Every hedge could be a fortress, every barn a machine gun nest. The Germans, when they appear, are ghosts. A muzzle flash from the tree line, the quick echo of a rifle, then silence again. The return fire is instinctive. Rifles crack, grenades arc, smoke drifts. A tank fires once, the shell whistling through the mist and exploding in a burst of dust and splintered wood. When the noise fades, the only sound left is the wind moving through the grass. By noon, they've advanced less than a mile. Every yard feels earned. The terrain is a maze, hedgerows thick with brambles, ditches deep enough to hide men, lanes too narrow for tanks. The Germans know this ground. They've mapped it, fortified it, learned how to vanish into it. For the invaders, every step forward is guesswork and luck. Still, the line moves. Engineers clear mines with long poles, listening for the faint click of danger beneath the soil. Scouts crawl ahead, marking safe paths with scraps of white cloth. The infantry follows, slow and deliberate. Thomas passes a small orchard where apples lie scattered on the ground, bruised and shining in the sunlight. A few have burst under the tread of boots, filling the air with their sweet, sour scent. He picks one up without thinking, wipes it on his sleeve, and takes a bite. The taste is sharp, almost painfully alive. They walk on, chewing quietly, as though the act itself might tether them to the living world. The afternoon heat settles heavy over the fields. The mist burns away, revealing a countryside that looks almost peaceful. Rows of hedges, gentle hills, the silver thread of a river glinting in the distance. Yet everywhere the land bears scars. Shell craters pockmark the meadows. Trees stand shattered, bark stripped by shrapnel. Birds perch on broken branches and stare without fear. The column halts again. The lead tank has stopped at the edge of a hedgerow cut by a narrow lane. On the far side, movement flickers, the brief shimmer of sunlight on glass, maybe binoculars, maybe a scope. The first shots come seconds later. Short bursts, precise. The men drop instantly, hugging the ditch. The air fills with the hard, dry crack of rifles, the whip of bullets through leaves. The sergeant shouts for them to flank. Thomas and Mills crawl along the ditch, knees scraping against roots. The smell of damp earth fills their noses. Somewhere behind them a tank fires again, the blast flattening the grass. Dirt rains down on their helmets. They reach the end of the ditch and peer through a gap in the hedge. On the other side, 3 German soldiers are firing from behind a stone wall. Their faces are pale, focused, men doing the same grim work as their enemies. Thomas raises his rifle, breath steady. One shot, then another. The recoil jolts his shoulder. The wall goes quiet. Smoke drifts. The silence that follows is worse than the fight. When they move forward, the Germans are gone, vanished deeper into the fields, leaving only their empty rifles and a single torn map fluttering in the grass. By late afternoon, the column reaches another ridge. From the crest, they can see far inland, a patchwork of fields and orchards dotted with small villages and the faint glint of water beyond. It's beautiful, impossibly so, and yet the air hums with the low thunder of distant artillery. The beach is miles behind now, but the sea still feels close, its smell carried faintly on the wind, its sound imagined in the mind. At the ridge, they halt to rest. Men collapse beside the road, drinking from canteens, lighting cigarettes with trembling hands. No one talks about the dead they've passed, or the farmhouses that burned as they moved. The silence says enough. A jeep arrives from the rear carrying an officer and a radio operator. The officer steps out, unfolds a map on the hood, and points inland. The men nod. They understand. Another line to hold, another night to survive. As the sun begins to set, the world turns gold. The fields glow, the dust shimmers, and for a moment everything looks like peace. But beneath that beauty lies exhaustion, a bone-deep weariness that seeps into every movement, every breath. Thomas sits on the edge of the ditch, cleaning his rifle. The metal gleams dull in the fading light. Mills lies beside him, hat over his eyes, half asleep. In the distance, artillery flashes like heat lightning on the horizon. The sound rolls over them softly, like the sea returning to shore. Night comes slow and gentle. The men eat from ration tins, the warm taste of stew strange after a day of powder and earth. The stars emerge, faint at first, then bright, scattered across a sky so wide it makes them feel small again. They are miles from the beach now, but they can still hear the sea in the rhythm of their hearts, that steady, endless pulse that brought them here and will carry them onward. The push inland has begun, and with it the long, patient work of turning invasion into liberation. Tomorrow will bring new fields, new names, new losses. But for tonight, there is only this: the sound of the wind through the hedges, the warmth of the earth beneath them, and the quiet certainty that they are still alive. The first true night inland comes softly, like a long exhale. Darkness folds over the hedgerows and fields, turning the day's destruction into shadow. The last light of sunset lingers low on the horizon, a faint orange haze above the far-off sea. Then it fades, leaving only the quiet shimmer of distant fires and the dull glow of the moon behind drifting clouds. The men have stopped moving for the first time in almost 24 hours. They sit in the grass beside the narrow lane they've taken, weapons close, helmets off. The air smells of earth, smoke, and crushed plants. Somewhere nearby, a cow moans softly, wounded, lost, or just confused by all the noise. It is peaceful, but not silent. Nothing in war is truly silent. The night hums with small sounds, the faint metallic click of a soldier reassembling his rifle, the whisper of someone lighting a cigarette, the low murmur of conversation from a nearby ditch, and beneath it all, the endless background noise of war, the distant thunder of guns somewhere far inland, the occasional burst of small arms fire echoing from another sector, the slow beat of engines out to sea. It is not quiet, but it is calm enough to think. Thomas leans against a broken fence post, his body aching in places he didn't know existed. His uniform is stiff with dried salt, his boots heavy with mud. Every movement reminds him of the weight he carries, not just the gear, but the day itself. Mills sits beside him, chewing on a piece of hard biscuit. He offers half, and Thomas takes it without a word. The taste is dusty, dry, almost meaningless, but it's food. The sergeant walks the line, quiet and methodical, checking that every man is accounted for. He stops now and then to share a few words, a brief nod, a hand on a shoulder. No speeches, no comfort, just presence. That's enough. Somewhere behind them, an army cook has managed to get a field stove running. The smell of hot coffee drifts through the air, faint but miraculous. The men turn their heads like animals catching scent of something sacred. A few minutes later, the sergeant returns with a battered tin mug and hands it to Thomas. Thomas takes a sip. It's bitter, thick, and scalding hot. It tastes like home, or something close enough to pretend. He hands it to Mills, who drinks deeply, then passes it along to the next man. Each takes a sip, eyes closing, shoulders relaxing slightly. No one talks about the dead. Not yet. They'll come to that later, when the world feels a little steadier beneath them. In the hedgerow behind the line, a medic has set up a small aid post. A lantern glows softly under a tarp, its light yellow and human. The wounded lie in the grass, wrapped in blankets, their faces pale in the dim light. The medic moves between them with quiet efficiency, whispering as he works. The words mean nothing and everything. They're the sound of hope spoken into the dark. Thomas glances over now and then, drawn to the rhythm of it. The calm voice, the steady hands, the way life and death can sit so close together and yet not cancel each other out. Beyond the aid post, a few French villagers have emerged from hiding. An old man, a woman, 2 children. They move cautiously, carrying a lantern and a jug of water. The sergeant meets them halfway, speaking softly in broken French. The woman nods, places a hand on his sleeve, and points toward the church at the edge of the field. The night deepens. The fires on the horizon burn lower. The sound of the sea has faded entirely now, replaced by the rustle of leaves, the occasional bark of a dog, the far-off rumble of armor moving inland. Someone begins to hum again, the same tune from the day before. Low, slow, almost a lullaby. It winds through the camp like smoke, a small thread of comfort in the cold. No one mentions how many of their friends won't make it home to hear that pride. The thought sits between them like another soldier, silent but understood. A messenger arrives on a bicycle, absurdly normal, as if plucked from peacetime. He salutes, passes the sergeant a slip of paper, and disappears back down the lane. The message is brief. Lines holding, reinforcements landed. Continue inland at dawn. The sergeant folds it and tucks it into his pocket. He tells them to rest. But rest doesn't come easily. The ground is cold and uneven. Every sound becomes a question. The rustle of leaves, the creak of wood, the faint metallic ring of a tank cooling in the dark. Sleep, when it comes, is thin and restless. Thomas dreams of water, not the sea but rain, falling gently on rooftops, on cobblestones, on the kind of streets that feel a lifetime away. He hears a child's laughter, a door closing softly, the smell of bread. Then the sound of thunder rolls in, and the dream dissolves. He wakes to darkness, his breath visible in the cool air. Around him, the others are still. Some sleep with their rifles clutched against their chests. Others stare into the dark, eyes open, waiting for the next order. Time stretches. The moon climbs higher, pale and watchful. Near the church, the villagers light a single candle in the window. Its glow flickers faintly through the night, steady and fragile. It becomes, for a few hours, the center of everything, a small point of light holding back the weight of the world. At some point, Thomas realizes that the fear has changed. It's still there, deep inside, but it has softened, reshaped itself into something else. Not courage exactly, but endurance, the kind of strength that doesn't need noise or reason, just the will to keep breathing, to keep moving when the sun rises again. He looks up at the stars, bright now, sharp against the black sky. For the first time since landing, he feels the immensity of it all, the sea, the ships, the countless men scattered across miles of coastline. Every one of them part of the same enormous, fragile plan. When dawn comes, it does so gently. A pale blue light creeps over the fields, revealing the shapes of helmets, rifles, and sleeping men. The air is cold and still. The birds begin again, tentative, almost shy. The sergeant moves among them, waking each man with a quiet word or a tap on the boot. The night has passed without incident. No counterattack, no alarms, just rest, rare and fragile. Thomas stands, stretching the stiffness from his limbs. His breath clouds in the morning air. Somewhere down the lane a church bell rings once, low, clear, and beautiful. The new day feels lighter somehow, even under the weight of what's to come. The men gather their things, sling their packs, check their weapons. The fire is doused, the coffee gone, the line reformed. They move out slowly, stepping over the grass flattened by their sleep. Behind them, the candle in the church window still burns, faint in the dawn. Ahead of them lies another day, another field, another hill to climb. But for one brief moment between the dark and the light, the world feels still. And in that stillness, amid the smoke and the silence and the soft breath of morning, the soldiers of D-Day remember that they are alive. While Thomas and his company dig in among the hedgerows and apple trees of Normandy, the same dawn spreads across hundreds of miles of coastline, a slow unfurling of light over an invasion that has swallowed the horizon. The soldiers on the beaches don't yet know the scale of what they are part of. To them, the world is only as wide as the ditch they hold or the field they've just crossed. But from above, from the view of a pilot circling in a reconnaissance plane or a commander staring down at the maps aboard a flagship, the full shape of D-Day begins to appear. It is vast beyond comprehension. 5 beaches, 5 code names whispered for months in training camps and briefings, now turned into geography and blood. Names chosen for secrecy, but destined to become something else entirely. Living symbols of courage, sacrifice, and the fragile machinery of hope. At Utah Beach, furthest west, the Americans have come ashore in better fortune than most. The currents pushed their landing craft nearly a mile south of their intended position, a mistake that might have ruined lesser plans. But here it saved lives. The ground was softer, the resistance lighter, and the tide favored them. Brigadier General Theodore Roosevelt, Jr., walking with a cane and refusing to remain behind, looked over the dunes, saw the error, and simply said, "We'll start the war from here." By the end of the day, the men of the U.S. 4th Infantry Division have advanced nearly 4 miles inland. Their losses are mercifully few. In their wake come paratroopers, men of the 82nd and 101st Airborne, dropped in the darkness hours before the landings, scattered by wind and confusion, but now gathering in clusters, taking crossroads, cutting off reinforcements, seizing bridges that hold the invasion together. Many of them will never see the beaches they made safe, but their work, invisible from the surf, is what gives the sea its purpose. Further east, at Omaha, the story is different. There, the sea ran red at dawn. The cliffs are high, the beach narrow, the tide cruel. The Germans have fortified every inch with concrete, wire, and interlocking fields of fire. As the first American boats approach, they are met with a storm of bullets and shells so fierce that entire companies vanish before reaching the shore. Landing craft burn, tanks founder in deep water, and men wade through surf choked with smoke and debris. The tide pulls them backward as they fight forward. Commanders are lost, radios drowned, plans shredded by the wind. For hours, Omaha is chaos. No clear lines, no order, just survival. Men crawl behind obstacles, press into shallow sand ridges, clutching their rifles and breath in equal measure. The sea gives no mercy, only momentum. And yet, somehow, they endure. Small groups begin to move. Engineers clear gaps in the wire. Riflemen climb the bluffs by hand, using craters for cover. Officers shout, are cut down, and others rise to take their place. Inch by inch, the impossible becomes inevitable. By midday, the cliffs are breached. The beach that was nearly lost becomes a foothold. The soldiers who make it through do not cheer. They simply keep walking, too tired to comprehend what they've done. By nightfall, Omaha holds, thinly, painfully, but it holds. Across, the water. Gold Beach belongs to the British. Their tanks come first. Special armored vehicles fitted with flails, plows, and floating skirts. They clear mines and crush obstacles as the infantry follows behind, moving through surf and smoke in steady lines. They take the villages of Vers-sur-Mer and Asnel by mid-morning, linking up with commandos who have landed on the flanks. By evening, they are halfway to Bayeux, their progress marked not by triumph, but by the strange quiet that follows exhaustion. One man writes in his journal that night, "I thought of England as I dug my trench. The smell of wet grass was the same, but the earth here is different, softer, older." At Juno Beach, the Canadians land beneath a sky already filled with smoke from the earlier bombardments. The tide is high, and their boats strike hidden obstacles. Many are lost before they reach the sand. Those who make it out wade through waist-deep water under machine gun fire, dragging their wounded comrades to safety before moving inland. They clear the first defenses by sheer momentum, pressing through the narrow lanes of Bernières-sur-Mer and Courseulles, fighting house to house, barn to barn. Civilians shelter in cellars while the battle rages above. By dusk, the Canadians have advanced deeper into France than anyone else, 6 miles inland, linking with British units to their east. Their commander will later call it a perfect hell that somehow produced progress. And then, furthest east, Sword Beach, where British and French troops land side by side. The first wave includes commandos led by Lord Lovat, wearing a green beret and carrying a hunting rifle. Beside him walks a man in full kilt and bagpipes, Bill Millen, who plays Highland laddie as bullets snap overhead. To the Germans, it must have seemed madness. To the men landing there, it felt like defiance itself, a reminder that courage can sometimes look like absurdity. By afternoon, Sword's troops reach the outskirts of Caen. But resistance stiffens. The city will not fall today, nor tomorrow, nor for many weeks. The cost of every street will be measured in blood. Above all this, above the sand and fire and ruin, the sky itself is full of wings. All night and all day, aircraft have crossed and recrossed the channel. Fighters, bombers, gliders, transports. Nearly 13,000 planes take part in the first 24 hours. The sound is constant. The drone of engines, the rush of wind, the echo of explosions far below. In the early hours, paratroopers dropped into darkness, some landing in fields, others in rivers, orchards, or enemy lines. They fought where they landed, often in groups of 2 or 3, turning confusion into advantage. Bridges were seized, roads cut, rail lines destroyed. By noon, the skies are full of new sounds, the hum of Spitfires and Mustangs providing cover, strafing enemy convoys, clearing paths for the troops below. To those on the ground, the planes are angels and ghosts alike, sometimes salvation, sometimes just reminders that the world above is still moving while theirs has stopped. At sea, the Armada continues to move. 7,000 vessels of every shape and size. Battleships like HMS Rodney and USS Texas pound the coast with shells the size of small cars. Destroyers creep dangerously close to the shore, firing point-blank into bunkers. Hospital ships anchor just beyond the surf, their red crosses bright against the gray. Among the great ships are the tiny ones, landing craft, tugs, minesweepers, fishing boats pressed into service, crewed by men who have never before seen combat. They ferry supplies, evacuate wounded, haul ammunition through the waves. Many will return again and again, even under fire, until the sea itself seems tired of trying to stop them. The channel is alive with movement, and somewhere out there, under the same rising moon that now glows over Thomas's Field, the ship's crews look toward the darkened coast and whisper to one another. They've done it. They're ashore. By midnight on June 6th, more than 156,000 men have landed in France. The cost is terrible. Thousands dead, thousands more wounded or missing. Some lie beneath the surf, some in the dunes, some under the soft fields where cows still graze, unknowing. But the line holds. The bridgehead is real. Behind the beaches, engineers have already begun to build. Roads, supply dumps, field hospitals. The miracle is not just that they came ashore, but that they stayed. That in a single day, chaos became structure, invasion became foundation. And as the first night of the liberation settles over Normandy, 1 million small fires burn across the coast. Camp stoves, lanterns, cigarettes, wrecks still smoldering. From the sky, it must look like a galaxy of stars newly born upon the earth. In the hedgerow outside the village, Thomas sits awake, listening to the quiet. He doesn't know what's happening 50 miles away, or 5. He only knows that they survived the day, and that somewhere beyond the darkness, others have too. He looks up and sees the faint glow of ships far out at sea, tiny sparks of light on the horizon. The sight brings a strange comfort. It means connection, continuity, home. He doesn't yet know that D-Day will be called a success, that the tide of war has turned, that history itself shifted on this morning's sand. He only knows that he is tired, that his hands still shake, and that the ground beneath him, this soil, this field, this piece of France, is no longer foreign. It belongs to them now, and they to it. Tomorrow they will move again. But tonight, the battle belongs to the past tense. The beaches are quiet. The guns are cooling. The sea, at last, is calm. Years later, when the world has long since mended its surface wounds, the beaches look almost ordinary again. The tides have done what tides always do. They have washed away the wreckage, softened the craters, pulled the sharp edges back into sand. Children run where men once crawled. Their laughter carries over the same water that once carried ships. The sea, patient and ageless, remembers nothing and everything at once. The villages of Normandy are rebuilt now. The fields that were cratered and burned are green again, their hedgerows thick with summer leaves. Tractors plow where tanks once climbed. The old church bells ring on Sundays. Life, stubborn and quiet, has taken root once more. But for those who came ashore that morning, the past never left entirely. It lingers, in the way the wind moves over the dunes, in the sound of waves breaking against the shingle, in the faint smell of salt and grass that always seems to carry a memory with it. Thomas comes back for the first time in 1964, 20 years to the day since the landing. He is older now, the hair at his temples starting to gray, his walk slower but steady. The ferry across the channel feels smaller than he remembered. The sea is calm, impossibly calm, its surface smooth and bright under the morning sun. As the French coast comes into view, a shape he once saw through smoke and fear, he finds himself gripping the rail without meaning to. The shoreline looks different, clean, peaceful. The bunkers still sit along the cliffs, gray and silent, their concrete scarred by rust and moss. Tourists climb them now, taking photographs, pointing toward the horizon where history began. He steps off the bus near the same sand he once stumbled across with 50 pounds on his back and his heart hammering in his throat. It feels softer now, almost forgiving beneath his shoes. He walks slowly, head bent, until he reaches the place where the dunes begin. There, he stops. For a long while, he says nothing. He doesn't need to. The sea does the talking, the endless whisper of water meeting land, again and again, as it has for 1,000 years. He kneels, presses his palm to the sand. The grains are cool, smooth, unremarkable. Yet beneath them lies everything, the memory of chaos, the weight of courage, the echo of a world that nearly ended. Behind him, a group of schoolchildren pass, led by a teacher pointing out the old defenses. Their voices are light, curious, full of questions. One boy breaks from the group, glances at Thomas, and offers a small wave before running back. Thomas returns it, a faint smile on his face. The future has come to visit the past, and the past bows its head in quiet approval. Further along the coast, rows of white crosses stretch across the grass in perfect order. Each one bears a name, a date, a number. The symmetry is haunting. The peace almost hurts. Thomas walks among them slowly, reading the names aloud under his breath. A few are familiar. Men from his regiment, boys barely 20 when the sea took them. Others are strangers, yet he feels the same ache for each. He stops at one marked simply unknown soldier. He stands there for a long time, hat in hand. The wind carries his thoughts away, scattering them across the grass. Elsewhere, others return too. In every town, every port, there are reunions. Men with canes and medals, old friends embracing after decades apart. They laugh more than they cry. They tell stories that begin with, "Do you remember?" and end with silence. They talk of weather, of ships, of rations that tasted of metal and mud. But beneath the humor lies something unspoken, a kind of reverence for the version of themselves that stayed behind on that beach. Some bring their families, wives who heard the stories but never quite felt the salt on their skin. Children who walk the sand wide-eyed, trying to imagine their fathers as boys. grandchildren who ask what it was like, and to whom the veterans give the only honest answer they can. It was everything at once. At sunset, Thomas finds himself standing by the water's edge again. The sky is painted in long streaks of red and gold. The sea reflects it perfectly, a mirror of peace. He takes from his pocket a small tin photograph, creased, faded, edges worn smooth by time. It shows a group of young men sitting on the deck of a landing craft, smiling despite the fear in their eyes. Mills is there too, grinning crookedly, helmet pushed back. Thomas stares at it for a long moment, then places it gently on the sand. The tide creeps forward, touches the edge, lifts it, and carries it away. He doesn't cry. The sea has done that for him 1,000 times already. Instead, he whispers, "Thank you," and lets the water take what it came for. When the world sleeps, Normandy does not. The wind hums through the grass, the waves turn and return. Beneath the surface, relics still lie. Helmets, rifles, fragments of ships, traces of a day that changed the shape of history. But above them, life continues. In the towns, cafes serve breakfast to tourists and farmers alike. Children ride bicycles along the same roads where convoys once rolled. The bells ring for weddings, for markets, for nothing at all. And every year, on the 6th of June, the veterans gather once more, fewer now with each passing season, to stand together in the dawn light and listen to the surf. The speeches are short. The silence that follows is long. They lay wreaths. They bow their heads. They look toward the sea, that eternal partner, and remember how young they once were. In time, the last of them will be gone. The voices will fade, the photographs will yellow, the bunkers will crumble. But the story will remain, carried in textbooks and films, in plaques on seaside walls, in the quiet reverence of strangers who walk the sand and feel the weight of what happened here. Because D-Day was never just a battle. It was a crossing, from fear into resolve, from tyranny into freedom, from the dark into the light. Every man who stepped off a landing craft that morning carried a fragment of that crossing within him. And when they left this world, they left it behind for the rest of us to walk. In the end, memory is not about keeping the past alive. It's about listening to what it still has to say. If you stand on the beach at low tide, when the waves are slow and the air smells faintly of salt and grass, you can still hear it. The echo of engines, the faint rhythm of boots in water, the distant voice of someone shouting to move forward. But beneath all that, there is something quieter still. The heartbeat of endurance, of men who did not look back, of courage so ordinary it became eternal. Thomas hears it as he turns to leave, that deep, slow rhythm, the sound of the sea breathing against the shore. He walks back toward the dunes, away from the past, but carries its voice with him. Behind him, the waves roll on, washing over the sand where history sleeps. And the world, at last, is still.